This is a training session that I did on Postman in June 2022. A disclaimer up front, I don't think I'm a genius at Postman. All I'm doing is sharing the work that I've done and the learnings that I've accumulated with some of my colleagues. I have constructed it in such a way that it can be a starter for Postman and get you up and running. Okay, so Postman, the reason why I'm doing the Postman thing today is because you guys had the session, I think 2 weeks ago with Andre, where he did APIs and how to build an API, specifically in Tina 4. And so this is a tool, Postman is a tool whereby you can actually query APIs, both APIs you use and APIs that you've made that are public. It's really handy for understanding how an API operates. I use it as a sanity check for when my code is not doing what I want it to do. I just pop on Postman and just check what I should be getting back from an API. So it works really nicely as a sanity check. You can also use it as a testing tool, and I'm just recently started doing that with one of our APIs that we work with. And it gives you an opportunity to, and there's a lot more stuff that it can do. So please understand, I'm not a genius at this. I've been kind of slowly teaching myself as I go when I need something to happen. There's parts of it that I won't even touch on today. And if any of you afterwards think that I've missed something really cool, just shout up and let's talk about it. So the first thing is, this is Postman. You can download it. There might be an online version. I'm not sure, but this is actually a local version that you download. So the first thing that you need to do is create yourself a workspace. So I'm just going to create us a learning workspace today. And I'm going to create the workspace. So it gives us a clean space to work in. The way it works is that you can set up what they call collections. So the first collection we're going to write up, and I'm going to call random person, and you'll understand why now. And you could also set up another collection, and I'm gonna do that just for the sake of, I'm just gonna leave it as new collection. Okay, we'll just leave it as new collection. So you can have multiple collections here, and the reason why this is important is that variable scope exists in different places. So you can have variable scope on an environment level. You can also have variable scope in a collection level. And so you'll see later when we start working with variables that I start referring to it as collection. But the scope happens in different places. So that's why you have these collections. All right. So you could have different collections, and then the things that go under the collections, they're referred to as requests. So you can add a request and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to get rid of this now because it just irritates me having things around I don't use. Okay, so let's make our first request. So all this is going to do is we're going to be able to ask a question of an API, and it'll give us back data. So I've chosen this one, which is create a random user. So I can show you how it works. So it comes up and it gives you this random user. There's images associated with it. And then there's all the person's details that you can get from it. Okay. So all the APIs work roughly differently. And you have to, if you want to read an API, you've got to read the documentation and you've got to figure out how it works, what information it can offer you. Often, not always, but often you have to offer some kind of auth key in a different way. So everybody does it differently. So it's not just you're going to dump an auth key in a certain place. Some of them want it in one place. Some of them want it in a header. It changes. So you just have to read the documentation carefully. I've chosen this one because there's no auth needed. So we don't even have to worry about that. It's very simple. And yeah, all you have to do now, please understand today is relatively unprepared. So I just have to figure out where we're going to do it. There's the first one there. So there's the random API. So if I just choose this, I'm guessing here. This is often how I work on this, is I just start by guessing. We add a new request. I throw it in here, and I see what comes back. And there you go. It gave me something. All right. So a really nice, easy API to work with. It gives me back a whole lot of data. Okay. So I'm going to just put here, we're going to change the name so it's useful. I'm going to say random person. All right. And there's my first one. So if I actually send it again, you'll see this is Mrs. Melissa Berry. If I send it again, I get someone else. I get Mrs. Miller Hokkinen, okay? And so who lives in Finland, and you can see all the information that they give you. So this is actually, the reason I chose this partially as well is because it's actually quite handy. If you're wanting to populate a database, you can actually use this. So if you go back to the documentation page, you can see here that you can actually request up to 5,000 users. So, I mean, you could get that in a JSON file, read it in, and then populate a database to get yourself a nice whack of users. So that's something that's really handy. Now, who have we got? We have got, I think it's a Mrs. Miller Hokkinen. So let's assume Mrs. Miller Hokkinen, her gender is female. Let's assume that we would like to find her a husband. So what we can do is we can see here that you can actually specify the gender of the person that you want. I'm going to take this. The first thing to understand is that when you write things in here, you do need to save them. All right. And if you don't save them, then often what can happen is that it's you kind of run it, but it actually doesn't run on the thing that you've got there, or you run it and then next time you come to use it, you wonder why it's not working because the changes that you put through haven't been saved. So what I often do is I often just right click and duplicate a request, because then what happens is I actually get all my stuff in there. I just then change this and say find a spouse, say it like this, and then all I have to do here now is I just have to go gender equals, and in this case we want it to equal a male, and we send. I hope I got that right. Yes, I did. Okay, and so now we get a mail. It's Mr. Samuel Lati, and there's all their person's information. And so you can see how you can, using an API, you can actually build up a little collection of requests that specify things. You can also here specify the number of the number of the password specifications. This one, that's what it allows you. So if you are testing or if you're trying to build data for something, you can actually specify how you want the password to be. And then they also do a thing called a seed, so that if you use a seed, then it gives you the same kind of set of people. And there's other things that you can do. You can specify how you want the format given back. You can actually use certain nationalities within reason. There's pagination involved, so you can actually limit the amount of stuff that you get back. And you can also then do some including and excluding stuff on fields, and there's a couple of other things here that you can do as well. So an API, obviously, you design the API you want the API to be, and we as users of this API or consumers of the API can only work within what they've offered us, and that's that. So if we go back to our Postman, all right, I'm just going to work with these two now because it will do for what we want. So the one thing that I did want to say is that here on the random person or on the collection, there's actually an ability to add documentation that then gets pushed with your collection. So if I go here, I can actually start writing. And this is markup. If you don't know what markup is, you can just go look it up. But it's a fairly simple way of writing, basically just writing simple comments and then just adding a little bit of stuff. It's a long time since I've done markup. And lucky for us, they've got some stuff here. So there's markup. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to say random user. I'm going to take the bold off. Okay, API. The bold does not look like it's off. So bold is off. Okay, so if you were doing if you were creating an API and you're planning on giving out your Postman collection so that people can use it, it actually makes a lot of sense to actually then do some documentation on the side. So, for example, if they have to get an auth key first, you tell them how to get the auth key. You tell them where the auth key has to be put when they do requests, and all those kind of things. So please just know that you can do documentation. And then what you can do is you can ship your collections, okay, by going, again, forgive me. There you go. So you right click the collection, you go export, all right, and then you can export the collection. And what it will do is it will ship that documentation with your collection. So at the end of this, I will export the collection and then we'll pop it in the learning channel for you guys. So you've got an example of all the stuff we've done today. All right. So we know that that's my random person and we know this is find a spouse. Now, what if I wanted to be a little bit cleverer, and because I won't always get a female back from this. So if I keep polling this, maybe I'm wrong. There we go. Now I've got a male back. So to find a spouse, if we want to find a female for this man, then we are going to need to change this now. All right. And we're going to have to change that to female so that we can specify. Now, if you've got a large collection, especially if you've got auth or you want to put things in, it becomes very, very complicated. So what one can do is one can use collection variables. Now, I don't use them like this, so forgive me if I get it wrong. Variables. Okay, so there's no variables here. So what we could do is we could actually add a variable in here, and we're going to say the variable is gender, and I am going to give it an initial value here, which I'm going to call female. I'm going to save that work, and then I'm going to go here, and what I can now do is I can take this out, and I can use the collection. So these are globals. This is a collection. I can use that gender variable. And so if I send it now, I will get myself another female. But if I go back to my collection and change my, now please understand that there's an initial value and then there's a current value. And it always depends on how it's being set. So if you were to start this up again and it doesn't have this in memory, it will use the initial value. Otherwise, all the time, it will use the current value. So if I change this to male now, it won't do anything because there's a current value set. So I'm going to set this to male. I'm going to save it. And then when I go back to my gender-based person and I send it, I'm going to get a male. All right. So that is how we can use variables, and that is how you will use variables throughout. And it then makes it very possible to just start doing multiple things, and you can actually use a variable, use a variable, use a variable, use a variable. So where I use this is I sometimes use the variable where I take this whole thing here and I change that to a variable. And it's really useful if you are testing the same API on a development or a local and on a staging system or then on a production system. Because what you can do then is you can also put in here, and you could put just URL, and we're going to just give it a current value. I'm not going to give it an initial and the current value. I don't think I copied it. That's actually the current value. And then if I go back here, whoops, I can do this and just go URL. And I think I didn't save this, which is why it wasn't showing when I went to do it. Save this. Let's save this as well. All right, so if I go back to this one, I've got the URL as a variable now. If I send it, I should still get something back because it's using that as a variable. And now I can do this here. I can do the same thing, but this time, remember that's the part there. And that then gives us the same thing, and we can send it, and it still works, we hope. There we go. All right. Are there any questions so far on that part?
None so far.
Anyone want to ask something about the variables? Because it's important, because we're going to start playing with the variables now.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you only use variables in your parameters, or can you also use it in other sections like authorization?
Yeah, you can. Absolutely. So you can actually see here in the parameters, I'm using it here. Up here, I'm using them on the URL, and you can use them in the auth as well. So often what you would do, the auth, you can either inherit it from the parent where you set it at a collection level, or what you can do is you can put a bearer token. Often it's a bearer token. They put it in like that. Sometimes what they do for the auth is they'll make you put in an extra header item. And so Postman allows you to do all of those kind of things, that you can feed its information in different ways. So this is normal parameters, which in actual fact get added here on the actual URL line. You could also include things as a body, where you can actually include it as a form. So you can pretend that the Postman's sending a form data to the API, because that also then has implications for the API. You can then spoof that. Some APIs will only take form data, or some of them need to have it as a raw JSON file. So you can also specify what kind of thing that you're feeding. If you just use raw, you can actually specify what you're feeding into it as well. All right.
Okay, thank you.
So the one thing that you can do with this is that there's actually, if you look carefully here, there's actually a pre-request script here. And if you look on the collections, there's both a pre-request script and a test script. Now what happens is Postman, you're able to use JavaScript to write tests. And there is a little API within Postman that you can also utilize. So what we can do is we can actually use this as a test environment. Okay, well let's step back one. Let's do some automatic testing on the system. So what we can do is, on this, the random person, we can actually say, well, let's actually write a test. So we can get the thing back. So this is a JSON. So what you can do is you can do this. You can do constant response, and I'm writing JSON. This is just a variable name, so it doesn't matter. And you go Postman, or I call it Postman. I don't know what it actually does stand for, but I guess it is. Response dot and JSON. Okay. And what you can do is you can also then console log this. Those of you who are JavaScript people and love console log, you can do response. There's it there, and that's that. So there's actually a console that sits here, very much like a browser console. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to shoot it off, and you'll see what happens is it gives me back the stuff, but then it actually tried to run something. Now it looks like I did it wrong, because I would have expected, I think this should have had brackets. Am I right? I am right. There we go. So what happens is it sends off the get, and if you actually click on this, you can get more information about the get that you sent. So you can see which headers were sent with it. You can see what response headers came back. All right. You can also then see the response body, where all the stuff is. And then it ran my little script here, and it pushed response.json out. And if I go down, you can see there's my results. There it comes in, and there's all the information there. Okay. So what it means is that we can start using all this information to our benefit. So, and forgive me if I get this wrong, because it sometimes is hard to get it. Sorry, I've got notes on the side, just so that you understand. All right. So let's see if I can get this right. So if I want to do this, I can actually, if I'm looking at this here, it's got results and then a 0. So I think if I was to do this, and then do gender and run it again, does not like that at all. I'm
You have to
guessing.
first target the results.
Say again. Am I doing
You'll
something
first
wrong?
have to target this results object, because the whole script is not a JSON. So you see, if you look at this, you see it goes a JSON, and then results is the array you want to target, and then you would go results 0 gender.
So you are suggesting I have to do this? No.
Dot.
The dot in JavaScript.
Yeah.
So results, and then another dot. Are you happy with that?
No, that's not going to work.
Go on, tell me then.
Because it should be without the dot. Go without, but and without these brackets.
You good?
Yes. Let's try it now.
Awesome. Well done. Okay, so maybe I should go through that just so everyone else can get it.
Yeah.
And this is the problem with these kind of things, is trying to understand the data, and that's often a problem with responses that you get back. Is it's often hard to understand what information they're giving you. Are they giving it as an object? Are they giving it as a JSON? And that's often what I use Postman for, is when I'm trying to do coding, it's so much easier just to come here, run it, see how it works, and then carry on. So if you look at this, you can actually see it a lot clearer than we were looking at it down the bottom. But you can see here that this is a JavaScript object, which has then got an array in it, and then it's an object again with these things in it. All right, so there's the objects, which is why it gets a dot, the array, why there's just a that, and then there's the object again. Did I do that right, Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that help. That was useful.
Yeah.
It solved me having to fudge over it. Right. So that then gives us our female. So what we can do with this now is we can actually use this to set a variable. So we agree that that's going to give us back the gender. So what we can do here is we can say pm.collection variables, and I'm going to call it, what should we call it? I think I have to set. Do I have to do it like this?
I think you have to go dot set.
Do I have to, oh, that's correct. Thank you. Dot set, and there we go. And you open it up. So if you look at dot set, I wonder if it gives me some. Does it give me helpers? No, it doesn't. Oh, it does.
Yeah. So it's normally the key, which will be the variable
I'm just trying to see.
name.
Okay, so you can see that it gives you. You see that it gives you. It gives you a whole bunch of stuff to help with. All right. So there's first a key, and then there's a string, and then there's a value that you can put in. All right. So what you do is you actually can just, if I remember rightly, do this, and I'm going to say gender. And in actual fact, we've already got that variable because we've used it before, but now it's going to set the gender. All right.
I don't think this response JSON has to be after the gender inside the set bracket. So it goes normally, you go set, and then you go the key.
I hear you.
Which is
I
the
hear
gender,
you. I hear you. Thank
and
you.
then the comma. There we go.
Dude, you should be doing the training.
Are
you happy now?
Yeah, that should work.
Right, that worked. Okay, I'm going to close down this console. Okay, so what's really important here now is to see what we've done. Okay, is that if we save this, I want this gone. So one of my frustrations is that you often end up with lots of tabs up here, and so a little bit of housekeeping is often useful. So what I want to look at is this, variables, okay? And you'll see here that our current value is male. So if I go back to our random person, all right, we've got a male here, okay? So if I run this, I get the male, all right, and it sets it as a male. So let's run it till we get a female. There we go. And if we look now, it's a female here. So it sets it for us, okay? So that's actually really handy, because what we can do is we can do this, is what if we change the gender to be the gender that we want? So what we can do here is we can actually say if this thing is equal to male, then we can actually set this, come on, okay, how's the logic? So what we're saying here is that if the response comes back and it's male, and I hope this if statement works, then we change the gender to female, all right? And then here we will then say, well, if the gender is male, well, then we just leave it as male, okay? So then we don't even need to do that. Yeah, we do, okay, because we need to set it. All right, so that's that. We save it and send. I'm going to pull that console up. Make sure it's okay, good. So what did we get? We got a male, so it should have set the current value to a female. All right, so we do it again until we can get ourselves a female. Oh man, sorry, we got one and I was too fast on the click. There's a female, so if we go and look at that, there's our male. All right, so what you can do is you can use JavaScript to do all sorts of variable manipulation, and there are a lot of different things in this PM. So if we were to go here, you can go PM dot, and then it tells you a whole bunch of things. So you can see the things you can access. You can access the cookies. You can get into the environment variables, the globals. You can then start doing tests, and I'll get into that just now. You can get both the request and responses. You can do all sorts of stuff with it. And then obviously it's also got access to the stuff that we've been playing with. All right. So there is a number of things that you can do with it. This is basically where we're going to go today. So what we can do now is, if we go on our random person, I send it, we get a mail. I can now go to find a spouse, and because of the way that we've set up all the variables, okay, where the gender is set as the gender, all right, we can actually just run this straight away and we will get a female because of the way that we've set it up. Okay, does that make sense? So we've setting the gender here, and then we're able to use it automatically in another request. And that's where the power of all these variables comes in. Okay. The next part that we can do is we can actually then start doing tests where you can actually, so imagine if you had a collection of 50 different endpoints. You don't want to be clicking every single one to go and see, is it getting what I've done? So what you can do is you can actually start doing some tests in those scripts. So what you can do here is you can actually say, well, and I'm going to write it at the top of my script. and you can go, and you can just go PM test, and then you can declare a test. Okay, find random person is the name of my test, and then you use an anonymous function. Oops. Sorry, clumsy fingers. There we go. All right, so we can use that there, and now we can actually put some more things in here. So we can actually say PM response to have and a status code, and we can specify the status code. So I'm going to specify 200, which is a code that one normally gets back if things have gone well. And then what happens is if we run this, you'll see here at the bottom, it says test results 1 out of 1. And if we click on this, we can see it says pass, find random person. So we know that this API call, this request call, worked. Okay, so that is a good thing. And you can put inside one, you can put multiple tests, or you can put multiple tests in that. All right. So what I could do is I could actually create another test. All right, and I can say that find random person is Jason. And I can actually then put a different test in here. And I can say, well, is the response, I'm expecting the response to be, and you can see all the different values you've got there. You can do all sorts of things, but I'm going to say I would like my response to be Jason, please. And now if I run it again, you can see my tests. Find a random person. I got back a 200. And is it Jason? Yes, it is a Jason. All right, because that's important because I can carry on here. And then what you can do is if you wanted to, you could actually say, well, on the result of this test, you could actually then determine whether you're going to run extra code or not. Because sometimes, imagine if it failed, then all this stuff would actually give you a JavaScript fail. So you can run tests like that on a request. All right, so we can also do that on this side. I'm just going to copy and paste it. And you'll understand why I'm doing this now, because I want to show you something else. Okay, so it's now find a spouse, and here we're going to find a spouse with Jason, and we can send it off, and you'll see we've got our tests that are working. All right, so we can add tests to something, and you can create all sorts of crazy tests. You could, if you look at the body that comes back here, you could actually do a determination, and I'm guessing that they've got an age on here somewhere. There you go. They've got an age. So what you could do is you could actually check how old the person is. And you could actually maybe do something here to determine whether the test passes or fails by checking their age versus, and you could put a value in the function itself. So there's numerous things you can do with this data to simulate testing of your API to make sure that it's getting back what you need it to do. Okay. So what's the value of the tests other than testing that your API is working is that you can actually then select this actual collection and you can run the entire collection. And what it will do is it will go through and it will run every single thing. All right. And it says here, this is the collection. Okay. I see this isn't saved. I just want to save it because if you start running collections and you haven't saved your work, it won't, it only works off the save one. Okay, so this is it, and there's the runner. So it creates this thing called a runner. This is the order. You can change the order, and that can be important because in our case it will be, because we want to find a random person and then we want to find them a spouse. So it runs in this specific order. You can actually do multiple iterations just to check that things are working okay. You can also save the responses and do all those kind of things. We're just going to leave it like this. I'm happy with it all. And we are actually going to run the whole collection. And then what it does is it goes through and you can see it's gone and run. Why did it run it twice? That was interesting. Why did it run it twice? Any thoughts by anyone? All tests, past 6. I'm obviously running it twice somewhere. There's 1 test, 2 tests. 1 test, 2 tests. That was interesting. Okay, I have no idea. Let's run it again. Oh, there we go. Oh, that was odd. All right, that's what I expect. Okay, so you can see now that it runs this and runs that, runs this and then runs that. Okay, and so what it does is it makes sure that we've got something happening. So let's actually do a bit of a change and see what happens. I really have no idea what this is going to do, but let's change it so that these here, I'm just going to add some random dots into the back, save it, and then we run the runner again. Interesting. It's still okay. So it's still passed because, but let's see what I wonder if we can see the actual bodies. I didn't save the bodies, so you can't. I wonder if I click on this. There we go. Request body, response body. Let's see what the response body was not logged. Okay, so let's log our response bodies again. I'm surprising these are coming back as 2000s. Let me just check something. As 200s. Interesting. I'm going to look at this. Variables. Interesting. We sent through male W, okay, as the value for the spouse. So this gender here is currently male W, but when you send it, interesting. It just sends back anything. Ah, that's fascinating. All right. So you can see how the API is working. Is that because we are sending something it doesn't understand, it just reverts back to its random state. All right. So that's just how the API has been designed. So that's an interesting thing. All right. So you can actually learn a little bit about how APIs are made or how they've, like the logic behind them by doing stuff like that. All right. Okay. So you can run a full test suite. So what you can actually do, and I do this on another API that I do. I log into the API. I then create a cart, a checkout cart. I add items to the checkout cart. Then I check out, and then I place an order with the shop, and that runs through and it does tests all the way through. Each time it goes through a place, it saves a variable and then puts it back on something else, and that's the kind of depth that you can do it. And the last thing that I wanted to show is how to mock a server, and the reason that one does this is that and there are probably other reasons, but this is the way that I have seen it as useful. So I don't use this in any of my production stuff that I do, but I wanted to just do a bit of research this week to understand how one can use it. Before we do mocking, we could actually let's do monitors. So the one thing that you can also do with Postman is that you can also create a monitor, all right, which means that you can actually run that collection. Okay, so monitor name. So we're going to say a random user, or let's say random couple, because that's what it does. The collection is the random person collection. We're going to use the current variables, I think. Current, if the collection is not linked to an API, monitor can Okay, so it's just using the current one. There's no environment for this. How do you want to run this monitor? So you can do it on weekly or minutes. I can't do minutes because I'm on a free plan, but you could do an hourly or a weekly, whatever. So you could set it. You could set it every day if you wanted, and you can set the time. You can set the time that you want it on. So what you can do with this is you can set it. You can also do other stuff. You can automatically select a region, or you can manually select a region. So if you are wanting, I can't do it because I'm on the free plan, but you could specify where you are pretending people are coming from. Then I get my email addresses to this. That's where it'll send me an email notification. And then if it fails 3 times, I've said, look, just stop after 3 times. And then there's other things that you can do for the run. And you can just create that monitor. And then what it's going to do is it's created a monitor there. And then what it'll do is it'll run on that system. And then it will give me an email once a week to say, hey, we ran on this, it passed, it failed. So the reason that one wants to do that is that it gives you a check on your API to say, is the API still running the way that you wanted it? So for example, you set up a whole batch of tests, which is the right way to do it. Then you're busy changing things on the code. You maybe test the one that you've worked on, but on a set of 50 requests, or maybe there's an outlier or a kind of thing that you've tested that doesn't work. Then what you do is you say, well, let's run our test once a week, and all of a sudden it fails, and you go, oh, I need to go and see what's wrong with that API. So the random monitoring, and we're doing that at the moment with one of my productions because we had a code clash a couple of weeks ago where somebody else changed some code and they didn't expect it to interact with our code, but it did, and it made our API fall over. So they've got no checking on their API system. So we've actually now put a monitor in place where once a week I just poll the API to say, is all the code still okay? Are we still is everything working the way we expect it to work? All right. Any questions on monitors? We're good. Right. Mock servers. So what you can do is you can add data to your collection that is fake data. And the one reason that it's really useful to do this is, let's say we're building an API and somebody else is building the front end or a front end website that is going to feed off our API. Okay. The two teams are working in conjunction with each other, but we haven't finished our API yet, but they need to use the API. They need to call the API or call the data so that they can get meaningful responses back so they can build out their responses. So what you can do is you can actually create mock data, okay, that they can then call the Postman collection. And then you can actually say, well, when you call this API, here's some data back that you want, and it can pretend to be your server while you're building out the API. So that's the one really useful way of doing it. I haven't thought of a really good other way of using it. As I said, I don't use them. I don't use them at all in production. On the mock server, you just go to create a server. Okay, we're going to select, and you can create a new collection, but I'm just going to create it. So you could actually create the collection from scratch. You could have designed your API in basically in a design. You could say what endpoints you're going to have, what the input's going to be, what the output's going to be. So sometimes you'll actually have an API document that has all that information for you. You can then sit here, you can build out a collection that won't test anything. You can build out the mock data and then use it as an API until your API is actually finished. I'm actually just going to use the selecting collection. I'm going to use this one because it's really easy. This is a random couple mock collection. That's fine. That's fine. Save the mock server URL as an environment variable. I'm going to say yes. Make mock server private. To call it private, you need an API key. Okay, so to make it private, you've got to use an API key. I'm not going to make this one private. It doesn't matter for me. You can also simulate a network delay. So in other words, you could say, well, I'm going to assume that my API has got 100 millisecond delay. That can be useful where you are shooting off stuff and your server is not answering quickly enough, and you can get some back-end errors because of delay like this. So it can be quite fun to play with. I haven't played with custom. Oh, you can really shoot it short. That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to put a delay of that. I'm going to create my server. All right, so I've created a server, and now what you've got to do is you've got to create things called examples. I'm going to take my random person. I'm going to run it. And then what I can do here is I could go on the save response. I can save it as an example. And now you can see what it's done is it's saying, when I run this, I must give this back. Okay? So what happens now is if I want to run this, this is going to be a problem because the URL is wrong, because I need to have this as my URL. I hope I'm right. Save it. If I take this now, yeah, it doesn't matter. I need to copy that. And I take it to my browser and I paste it in, I should get back my JSON file. There it is, Mr. Landon. Okay, because this is now in the public domain. Postman has made this available in the public domain. So what you can do is you can give this URL, all right, to the person, whoever's testing it, and when they hit up this URL, okay, it's going to give them these results back. All right. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense? Am I making sense here?
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah.
So this is a public URL.
So basically what it does is it creates a public URL, yeah, with a set data return. All right. So it's a set data return. That's what's important here. And I could do the same thing here, but here what I can do is, remember, I've got to put this in here. All right. Because I'm hitting up the mock server. All right. So I'm hitting that up. Okay. So now because I'm getting that, I've got to hit that up. All right. So I'm going to send that out. It should give me a female, which it didn't, because maybe it didn't set it. Interesting. Okay. So I didn't pick this up when I was testing, but it doesn't run any tests. Do you see that? Doesn't run any tests.
Yeah.
So that means then that the sparse setting didn't work. I'll have to play with that and figure out how one then does it. But what should have happened is we should have then got the gender in. That's interesting. So what you need to do, yeah, so you got to do it like this. Okay, I get it. So you delete. So it changes the thing that you can't get a lot of random information out of the exampling. So what we should have done is we should have done this. You send it, because now it will run the tests. Sorry, I need to change this back. Okay, so there's that there. So let's save it. Why is it not giving it back to me? Oh, interesting. All right. So what we can do is we have to go send. And then what we're going to do is we're going to save that as an example. And because the tests have run, we can then go here, send, and we can then save this as an example. Because now this example here, which is a female, will match the example here that we've created. So you've kind of got to massage it a bit to get it to work. And then now what we've got to do is we've got to get our mock. really doesn't like it when I click on this. Oh, I've got to click on that. Okay, I get it. Okay, and then what we can do is the mock. I need to get my URL, copy the URL, go back to my collection, and now I need to set that there, not here, there, and that there. All right, and that then sets those two there like that. And now I'm just going to save everything. Save that. Right, that looks good. And so now what we've done is we've created a mock set of data. So when someone hits up the website, they're always going to get back the same stuff. So it's not really the random person that they want, but it will give them the structure that they can then start building out their applications, and they can start building out their front ends. It's going to be the same person all the time. That's fine. If you really wanted to get fancy, I'm sure that you could build it out with JavaScript to create all sorts of different stuff all the time, and that's fine. But that's then how you would use the mocking server to then pretend that you've got something there. So this here, yeah, it would probably have to then be something like a. And what you could do is, yeah, it doesn't work. Sorry, my brain's thinking and talking to itself at the same time. Okay, so here in actual fact, the call here, it doesn't really matter because it's always going to be giving this back. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like it is. All right. I hope that rambling thing about mocks wasn't too confusing. Does everyone have that? Do we need to ask any questions about mocking? We're good. All right. And guys, that's pretty much all I've got for you today. You can, if you look at your mock, you can actually see, you'll see here that it shows what was being called on the mock. So there is a little bit of you can actually see what people are doing. You can also see what they're sending. So you can see the information that they're sending if you want to make sure that they're sending the right stuff. So there is much more, I think, that you can do with mock. It's not something I've played with, as I said, but I just wanted to show you what you can do with it, just to try and give you a bit more of an idea of Postman. And that's pretty much Postman. A really great tool for using for APIs, for consuming them, and for writing little tests, and for doing some automation with them. Are there any questions at all on this?
Could you maybe touch on the environments, maybe, just so people can see the usefulness of an environment?
Okay,
I normally set my base URLs in the environments.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing that you can do with an environment is that you can set up environments. Okay. So we've got a random couple mock because the mock server seems to set up its own environment because, and I'm guessing the reason is because it needs to see its variables that it saves. Okay. So that's what it's doing. It saves a URL variable in there and it's using it. Okay. Now what you can do is you can set up your own environments. So I haven't done this for a while. So here's the environments. You can actually add an environment here. So what you could do is you can add a production environment. And then here you could put your variables like gender. You could do that here. You could also put your, Jonathan, you say you use your URLs here, huh?
Yeah. So that you can change between.
You could put your URLs in here for environments. So you could do production URL, and then you can put whatever the URL is. So production dot poser. You can then also change this.
Tokens.
Say again. Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. You would also do your auth token here.
And like bearer token, so you can have it as a secret also.
So you can actually put a secret. I don't know what that means. Does that just mean that when I type it here, you can't see it? Okay, yes. Like that. So that's useful as well. Oh, that's interesting. One of the reasons I didn't want to show you my production ones was I do mine differently. So yeah. So you can do that. And then what you can do is you can then create another one. staging, where you can also have URL and you can have auth token, and you could put in a different auth token, and here your URL would be staging.coza. All right. So you could put different environments, and then when you're running your checks, okay, you can then sit here, okay, and you can choose which environment you want to use. And by selecting the environment, it's going to then use those production variables. Now, that means that in your collection, these variables we've put here should match up to the variables that we've been using. Now, I've been using collection variables, and you've got to be careful because when you are using variables that have the same name, there is an order about which one it will use. Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it uses collection variables. It uses the lowest version of the variable. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it would use a collection variable would overwrite an environment variable. So you do need to be careful on that. Okay. The way that that's so much better than the way I do it, to be honest. I must start doing it again. So the way I do mine is I actually, in my collection here, in the actual collection, I put in a pretest, okay, and then I actually just set them here. So what I do is I just say server. Sorry, I just say constant server equals 1, let's say, and then I put a switch case server like this, and then I can't even remember if I got the syntax right here, and then I do case 0, which I use for case 0, okay, which I use for my mock server, and then I think I have to do a break in here. Oh, I've got it wrong.
That would just be before that.
Say again?
It would just be before these dots and then dots there.
I'm with you. Thanks. Like this, okay, and then you could, and then I would do my mock. I would do a pm dot environment dot set, the same way we did the collection variables, and then here I would say I would set my URL, and I would then put the value in here, mock.co.za, whatever it is, and then this I would put as a 1, and then here I would put my staging, and I'd do my staging here. That's the way I've been doing it. I like your way of doing it. Yeah. So I do it like that, partly because then I can just see what everything is in at one space. I like that I can just see everything in one place. However, if you have been using variables from one time to another, then this actually isn't, because mine, it sets these variables every time I run it. Okay. Whereas here, if you've had them put in here, it'll probably save the variables between sessions. Can you confirm that, Jonathan?
Sorry, you were saying?
Do the variables last between sessions?
Yes, they do. So it will keep it. It will save it in the session. Yes.
In the sessions, whereas mine doesn't. Mine sets every time. So that's the benefit of doing it like this. All right. Thanks for that. That was good. Any other questions or any other comments that people think we should cover? Those of you who've used it?
I think this is quite a very good overview, actually.
All right. So that gives you an idea of what you can. I often find that sometimes it's really nice just to know what something can do, because when you actually then want to use it, you go, okay, I remember I can do that with that tool. Off I go and I figure it out. Because by the time you get to use it, maybe you've forgotten this or it's all just kind of washed over. I hope it's been useful. If there are questions about it, of course, you're welcome to hit me up and chat. But I hope that this has given you an idea about using Postman for APIs. I highly recommend it for testing APIs, sanity checks, and also exploring an API when you're starting to build out code. So in other words, if you're consuming an API, it's really nice to use to test out code to see what kind of responses you're getting back in entirety. Because sometimes you don't even know what information it's going to give you. And then that's useful to understand as well. All right. Guys, have an awesome weekend. And I hope that you enjoy using Postman in the future. I must say that I love it so much. I've even been contemplating getting out a subscription for it. So yeah, it's been a real game changer in all of the work that I've done. All right.